Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Healing Words podcast. Jelene Antonio is a former neuroscience and healthcare professional who left the corporate world to explore the globe. Her decade as a digital nomad has brought self-discovery, meaningful connections, and a deep love for travel. She's known online as Jelene on the go. She empowers women to transform their lives through solo travel. Welcome, Jelene. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you and yeah, just get to know you as well.
Excellent, excellent. Where are you located now?
I am currently in Da Nang, Vietnam. So this is my fifth month here.
Okay, okay. Let's back up a little bit. You worked for over a decade in corporate um, corporate healthcare and in the biotech field. Tell us a little bit about what you did then, and how you knew it was time to leave.
Yeah, so really there were two major parts of my career. There was working in healthcare consulting. So that took up around 6 years of my experience. And I did a lot of financial modeling, working with C-suite execs at large national healthcare systems and helping them with valuations. So valuations of businesses that they were acquiring or contracts for physicians. It was a lot of numbers, a lot of spreadsheets, and a lot of PowerPoints. Also, some travel involved in there, but not fun travels. I was traveling to, the middle of nowhere literally in the middle of Florida, and then having to drive to older practices, older doctors' offices to value equipment or meet with some of those owners and talk about their assets, for example. So that was the type of work I was doing. Didn't
Okay.
give me a lot of purpose, but it was in the quote unquote a successful career, right? So I was doing healthcare consulting, I was making a lot of money, and uh I had a title that people would recognize coming from an education in healthcare. So I had studied initially to become a neuroscientist and a neurologist, and then pivoted as I realized I didn't love working in a hospital or a lab. And so went into consulting. And then from consulting, I pivoted into the biotech world, working for a software company that was the platform for pharmaceutical companies and other biotech companies to design things like vaccines and genetic sequences for research. So I was
Wow.
working with clients on helping them optimize their scientific workflows using the platform. So very technical, either in the financial side or in the software analytics side. So that was really a lot of what I was doing. And while it was using my brain and it was using my degree, and my mom was proud of me because I was independent, and she could tell her friends I was in the science and the healthcare field, right? Which, as a Filipino immigrant, that is what you want, the box you want to check
Right,
off for your
right,
mom.
right.
um but I knew for me that I was working a lot. So it was not just 8 hours, maybe it was 12 hours. Sometimes I got to the point, because I was a workaholic too, that I would work 16 hours. Because in consulting, you bill the hours that you work, but anything administrative is on top of that. So if you're working on proposals, or if you're trying to climb up that corporate ladder by doing extra work, then it's not necessarily billable work. So you're having to bill X number of hours, like 40 hours a week to the clients, but anything administrative or learning is billed on top of that. And of course, you're
Mhm.
wanting to learn. And then if I'm traveling as well, some of that time is billable, but also not as well, because you're traveling and driving, and then the balance in your life is just not there. So
Right.
after around 6-ish years working there, and also some politics, right? Because being a woman in consulting, it's still a very much white male dominated field, especially in healthcare. Healthcare is a very
Mhm.
conservative area as well. And so, I remember starting off in that career without an MBA. So I worked my way up from project coordinator to get into more of the financial modeling side. So I'm working with white men in finance. And
Mhm.
that was also like a big toll on me, and trying to like push myself through imposter syndrome constantly,
Right.
and really burning out from the workaholism that I induced on myself, but also in that trying to succeed and climb that corporate ladder, and earn my seat at the table. It was a lot of burnout that I was facing. So when it was around the pandemic when I realized I would rather have COVID than go to work. I
Oh
remember
my.
a big moment was actually, so I started traveling full time. So in 2020, we locked down, and that was like the first 6 months after a long time that I hadn't traveled at all. Was from March until around like September. And I also had a pandemic relationship. And so I remember at the end of that relationship, I was really sad and I had the choice. My best friend was like, "Are you gonna stay and do another quarantine period for the winter in Chicago, your fourth year winter in Chicago,
Mm.
heartbroken? Or do you want to come to New York and visit me and stay with me and my husband and two dogs for 2 months and we'll quarantine together and it'll be great." And I was like, you know what? That sounds lovely.
Right.
So that's how I started my digital nomad journey actually was let me just heal from some heartbreak with my best friend and her family and just be taken care of by some loved ones. And then I'll figure it out from there. And I kept my Chicago apartment on sublet at that point. And then um, I was still working in that consulting firm and I continued nomading around the US and I started realizing I was just taking my laptop and all of my problems with me in each of the destinations I was going to. And I finally hit a breaking point in Louisiana, New Orleans, where I was there and I got COVID and I was, trying to navigate the healthcare system there solo, especially under quarantine. And that was pre-vaccine as well. So it was
Oh.
a lot going on, but I was like, you know what? I would rather this than have to go to work. And and I even extended my like leave of absence because I had COVID and I was like, you know what? This is much better. At least I don't have to like do that model or do that presentation, whatever it was. And that's when I
Mhm.
really started realizing like there's something wrong if that's
If you think you would rather have COVID than go to work, I think that's a clear sign that you probably shouldn't be working there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there was a lot of changes as well that was happening within the company during COVID and like of course like my management was changing around at that same time. So
Mhm.
it was a lot. I think what had kept me there for so long was the team. I really liked my team and the people that I worked with. But once that started to change and I wasn't even seeing them in person and the work was getting harder, and as I was getting more burnt out, then I started losing the reasons that I was actually doing that job, doing that career.
Okay, so you've mentioned digital nomad more than once
Mhm.
here. To those who don't know what that is, could you explain what that is?
Yeah, so a digital nomad really it encapsulates a lot of different types of people. So there's no one type of digital nomad, but in general, it is someone who is traveling full time. And you may or may not have a base. Like I gave up my Chicago apartment, all of my things. I've been living out of a suitcase for the last 4 years, and I've been traveling every 3 to 6 months to a new city around the world. Some people will still continue to have a base, but still have travel as a majority part of their lives. And others travel much faster, much slower. But really, the thing that we have in common is that we have an online job and we travel for an extensive period of time.
Okay. Now, you've talked about on your website, you've talked about how traveling changes you. There's an inner
Mm,
transformation. I'll be interested in hearing the changes that you have made in this decade since you've been doing this.
yeah.
And specifically, if there's one thing that just floats to the top, something happened and it just a total shift in thinking.
Yeah, so when I started traveling solo, that was at the age of 25, and I had started by backpacking through Europe. And this was really the breaks that I gave myself in my career. So I would save up all of my vacation time. So if it was 2 weeks per year, I would save up 2 weeks each year for the 2 years max. They would let me save it up and do like a full month of travel in Europe. And I did this a few times. Where I would just completely escape my life for that 1 month and then come back and realize, oh, again, it's like, oh, I wish I had COVID. It's like I'm
Mhm.
dreading coming back. It's like dreading coming back from that vacation is always like the hardest period because you're faced with the life that you left behind after when you go to these solo travel trips, or when I did, I was meeting new people. I had friends that we just immediately had connections. I was seeing amazing, beautiful things. Art is a big part of my life, and I was able to see the masterpieces that I had been staring at all of my life in person. And I just stepped into this version of myself that I knew that was me.
Mhm.
But then I would have to go back into the life that I had created and just not feel aligned with that version. But at that point, when I was still living in San Diego, at the age of 25, like I was in, I think at that point it was like close to a 10-year relationship. I had the consulting position and I didn't want to give that up. I had friends and all of my things in San Diego. And it's like, oh, okay, well, who is that version that I see on vacation? Why is she only available there? And I kept seeing that same realization after every long trip that I made. And even my best friend knew, and she was the one in New York as well. She plays pivotal part of my life. But she had moved to New York and she would see me in San Diego and she's like, I know that there's more out there for you. You know that there's more out there for you. You see it on these trips, yet you're settling for San Diego. And I was like, I'm not trying to settle for San Diego, but this just, like it's not working out. I've been applying to jobs. I've been trying to do these things. It's just not working out. And what ha ended up happening, and like I guess my big pivot moment was after one of my big trips, I had come back and it was just kind of slipping further into depression,
Mm.
workaholism, and then a friend actually from high school had passed away, and I wasn't very close with her, but it did shake me up a little, and was like, oh wow, like high school was, like how many years ago, and
Right.
where was she and where did she end up, and having these thoughts in my head of like, where am I and what am I doing, and life is so short. And that's when I started asking, like, what's the point? Like, what am I doing with all of this? And ended up seeing a therapist at that point because all those thoughts were too consuming for me. And that's when we started to really detangle, like, what I had created with my life and all the aspects of it that I was unhappy about. Um, Travel remained part of the lifestyle for me, where I would continue to escape my life and use that as moments of, so before it was ways to escape my life, but then as I started doing therapy and as I started to really unravel all the decisions that I made and let them go, I started using travel as a way to really create the life that I was seeing while I was
Mm.
traveling. I was like, oh, okay, I remember that version of me that made friends. Why don't I have any solid friendships within my current city? And then I would try to introduce the things that I was doing while I was traveling back at home. Or it's like, oh, I'm doing all these adventurous things, going to art museums and learning new things in classes, but I'm working 16 hours a day and not doing that at home. So, of course, I'm not feeling the same, right? So, before it was an escape, then it became kind of this vision of of a life that I knew I could live because I had lived it in other cities, and trying to incorporate those two halves of myself into one whole person. So that was
So,
really like one of the biggest transformations.
okay. So you became aware that when you traveled, you were like a totally different person.
Hmm.
Then you would come back. So you would travel, love it, pick up all kind of great skills, inner and outer, then come home and fall right back into the workaholism. I can
Hmm.
imagine that was crazy making.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because it's almost like, did that even happen? And when you don't have
right.
like close, good friends or family that understand that version of you or even know that version of you while you're traveling, then you forget that yourself and you go back into
Hmm.
your regular grind and you
Yeah,
chase that high of, oh, okay, like, okay, I know how to get it. I just have to go on a trip again. And so
right.
you get stuck in that cycle, and it's so easy to do when you only have set amount of vacation days per year. So I was wrapped up in that cycle for a bit.
Okay. And you mentioned um traveling, not using traveling as escape. And you
Mhm.
actually named your one of your platforms
Yes.
Travel Not to Escape. And if you could give us a little bit of more thought behind why you titled it that.
Yeah, so this is a journey that's been so long for me, right? It's taken over a decade for me to even realize that this is what I was doing and it involved a lot of learnings, a lot of hard lessons and healing. And I actually was on a different podcast a couple years ago, and we were talking about using travel as an escape. And she asked, like, "Oh, what do you want to title the episode?" And I just quickly said, "Travel Not to Escape." And that ended up being the name of my own podcast and the platform that I've created because I realized, what is it the thing I had to ask myself at one point, what is the thing that I want to help others with and who do I want to help? And I realized I was looking back at that younger version of myself that was stuck in that life that she thought she wanted and that she created and was living and felt suffocated by. And I want to help that person because I believe that there's a lot of women that are still living that same life that I was living. Maybe they're trapped in relationships or cities or family circumstances or whatever it is that has kept them in place. But they know deep down, or they've seen and felt it maybe on their own travels, that there's a different version of themselves. So I want to help them get out of that cycle that they're in because it took me a long time to get out of there. So if I can save someone some time and help guide them into the direction that they're meant to go, then that feels really fulfilling for me. So that's why I named that my platform, and that's really the central theme that I focus on now.
When you're out and about talking to women, what are some of the reasons that you hear from them that they can't do what you're doing?
Yeah, I think finances, of course, is the biggest one, is understanding like what does it take to do this from a financial standpoint. And the second one is safety and just not knowing really like you get so much from the media or so much misinformation regarding different countries that it freezes you into place. And then also loneliness, not wanting to be alone on this adventure and wanting to really share the memories with other people and feeling like it might not be as fun if you don't go with others. So those are really the top three that I've heard.
Okay. And each of those has its own remedy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the finances piece, I was paying close to $2,000 a month in rent for a studio in Chicago. Granted, that was in the middle of like the business area and then the loop, but it's still really pricey. And right now I'm living in Vietnam, and all included with food, I might spend $1,000 a month. My rent is around 400. And that's actually a little pricier than most, right? So when you think about traveling to another country, as a digital nomad, it's much different than on vacation. On vacation, you might be spending like thousands of dollars for a week, because you're staying in like hotels, you're staying in uh, fancier places, eating out all the time.
Eating out.
But really, yeah, you have to think about this as a lifestyle rather than a vacation. And the benefits of which is, yes, I'm actually very minimal with like the clothing and the items that I have. I do live out of like a large suitcase. Um, but it's very freeing to do that. And also, I get the added benefit of being able to work at the cafe, or like I actually choose to work at this bar on the beach whenever it's sunny, and just to have inspiration by the environment around me. I meet new people literally walking out the door every single day.
Mhm.
There's events happening, whatever event you're into, there's an event for you. It's very easy to make friends. People actually are more inclined to meet you and get to know you when you are traveling solo than when you are traveling with someone else. So if you've traveled before with other people and you're like, oh, I never met anyone, and that you're using that as a basis, just know that it more people approach you and there's more I think it's just more welcoming, because it's less intimidating to approach one person than it is to approach two or a group, for example. And then in terms of safety, you would not realize how safe it is outside of the US. Um, I can leave my stuff in a cafe here in Vietnam, go to the bathroom, go order drinks. Like it'll all still be there. I actually went to South Korea recently as well, and there's CCTV everywhere. My Korean friends were leaving their things on the steps of the beach, hundreds of kilometers away from where we were ending up having like a picnic or in the water, and it was there at night, still all their things, right? And
Yeah.
so Southeast Asia is super safe. I lived in all over South America and Central America, and while there are more things to think about in terms of like making sure your phone isn't stolen, like you're not waving your $1,000, $2,000 phone around or your MacBook, um, it's still I'm not afraid I'm gonna get shot. So I
Right.
think that there's just a lot different safety precautions or safety things that you have to realize. Um, that are different between the US and outside of the world. And a lot of people actually are afraid of going to the US because of the gun violence. And um so yeah, it's the perspective is different because a lot of people from the US might be scared to go abroad, but a lot of people abroad are really scared to go to the
From
US.
the US, exactly. And I know someone who lives outside of the US, who used to live here, lives outside of the US, and she really thinks it's all propaganda to keep you here to
It is,
work
yeah.
inside of this framework. So
Hmm.
we're told that other countries have sky high crime and other countries are third world countries and they're not up to our level. And
Yeah,
she
but you
says
don't
that's
realize oh no, the cities, things are running so fast and so organized and so smooth. Like I think I had an idea of like all these different countries when I was living in the US. You wouldn't think that Buenos Aires in Argentina looks like France, for example. Like beautiful
wow.
architecture, art and culture. The opera is like 8 tiers, gorgeous view. Like it's absolute, and it's cost like $20 for a ticket to see an
Yeah.
opera. So you could go see the opera multiple times per week without breaking the bank. And local
'Cause we
Argentinians
don't
do it
think
as
that.
well. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't think about all these things that you do, or like even in Vietnam of like, oh yeah, I'm just this weekend, I'm just gonna go to this temple or this mountain or this UNESCO site, right? Like there is so much beauty that can be found in all these different places. I don't even think about any of the news. Actually, I've tuned out a lot of the news, especially recently, um, because they want to paint a picture of fear, and that freezes you into place in your own life. And if you can't control what's happening, you don't want to limit your own progress because of it.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm wondering, do you see connections between your new career that you've built here and your old career? Do you see any connections there?
Yeah, so when I had quit, so I ended up going into tech after consulting, and then after that, ended up quitting that career as well. I'm also equally burned out. So at the end of 2022 was when I took that leap. And so it's been 2 years now, actually, exactly, since I have left corporate. And at first, I wanted to go pivot complete opposite, right? Like from this neuroscience financial modeling, software techie background, and to travel content creation. I just wanted to make videos and share that with the world and uh educational content and really like I hosted play events, really just started to lean into that more creative side of me. So I did that for at least a full year. And then this year is actually when I realized it's okay to have both sides of you. And
Hmm.
while I had um, put it away for a little bit, the analytical data side, I realized, oh, I miss it. And that's still really a huge part of my personality. And even as I was creating content and doing brand deals and working with companies in that way, I realized I was still using the skills that I learned in corporate to negotiate contracts, to create pitch decks. Like everything really ends up being the same process for
Mhm, mhm.
doing the work and selling the work, etc. And instead of hiding from that side of me, I realized, okay, let me embrace it. And I started really thinking about why did I live that life? Why did I learn so much in a very weird, specific skill set of financial modeling and neuroscience and software? I started really piecing apart all of the things I learned from these prior careers and then asking, okay, now that I'm here doing travel content and focusing on mental health and creating a podcast, like how can I marry my past to my present so that I can create a future that feels really aligned to the impact that I want to make in this world? And so that's kind of where I came up with the platforms for Travel Not to Escape, including a therapist directory, incorporating the background that I have in healthcare with the travelers who need the mental health resources, combining those two worlds. And then the platform that I'm creating that incorporates AI and community and helping people make friends all over the world, really combining all those skill sets with the currents to create something, again, another resource that travelers can use to help them on some of these fears that they had regarding connection, regarding safety, for example. So yeah, it's kind of combined intentionally to make
Right, right.
something that is unique to me.
Okay. So to get an idea of what your work life looks like now, you have a podcast,
Yes.
correct? You have the two things you just talked about, the community database and the mental health
Hmm.
and travel database.
Yes.
You also have Passport to Connection. That's what Passport Connection is. Do you
Yeah.
also work one-on-one with women?
I do. So I also offer solo travel confidence coaching. So for any women who feel like they want to go on their first trip, and they're hesitant to go. They don't know how to really get there. They're anxious maybe about the finances, the safety, or the connection. Then I'll create a strategy with them and help them choose a destination that's going to align with what they're looking for in their transformation at that moment. So if someone's completely burnt out with corporate and they're wanting to get an escape, I might not recommend that they go on a backpacking trip where they move around to 20 different cities in 1 week, for example. It's like really aligning the location with their goals and who they want to be when they come back and helping them also do that integration process so that they're prepared for when they come back and they can pull the things from their travels that they can sustain in their normal life. So they don't have that duality within them that I
That
had.
whiplash that you had, right?
Exactly. So I help them with really that process that I went through, and that's on a one-on-one basis. And I also I work with therapists and helping them. So I've pulled back in my business consulting side. So I help therapists optimize their practices using AI and technology so that they can reach a global audience and really be able to help as many people as possible with the services that they're providing. And that pairs well with the directory that I have. Because I'm working with a therapist and I'm also interviewing them on my podcast. I'm also interviewing the community leaders on my podcast as well as the travelers. So really I want it to be like a centralized resource where people can like not only get the inspiration to travel, but also have the tools to be able to
Right.
do it themselves.
It's practical as well.
Hmm.
Tell me some of your favorite places you've traveled. I know you're in Vietnam now.
Yes, one of
You
my
like that
favorite
very
places.
much.
Yes, it's just such a livable city, a livable country. It's easy, safe, affordable, great quality of living, beautiful nature, beautiful culture and art and history. It really is. I love all those aspects whenever I find a new city that has this perfect web of these things that I always love in every city. Like I fall in love because it's just all the things there that make me happy. So Vietnam is one of them. I also I lived in Bali for 4 months prior, actually last year. I also really love Bali. I went and lived in Ubud, so I loved living closer to the rice fields and the jungle and being more connected with nature, and also connecting with like the local Balinese culture, and they're super spiritual, and it was just such a beautiful place to live in. Um, and I also love Buenos Aires. That's one of my
Mm.
favorite cities. Lived there for 9 months. As I mentioned, the art, the culture, the people, the food. It's just an amazing place. And I also lived in Mexico, in different parts of Mexico for a year.
Mm.
So I lived in Puerto Vallarta for around 7 months. So that's always like a great spot for me, especially to recommend to other people who are just starting off on their journey, especially from the US, because it's easy to get to. It's a beach city. It's rather walkable and also like easy to um to step into right away and not feel like like I don't know the language, etc. Because there's a lot of
Right.
English
Like
speakers.
you
So
falling into another world. Right.
yeah. So it's easy. It's a good place to transition into if you're just starting out on your travels. So those are just some. Of course, like there's areas in Europe as well, but I'm naming the whole world now.
Okay. Now, did you ever have any family or friends who didn't quite understand what you were doing, who thought, Jalene, this sounds kind of crazy? And how did you overcome that? And how do you coach other women to overcome that?
Yeah, so my mom was not a huge fan in the beginning because it's like, oh, okay, when I first started traveling, I was 20, studying abroad, and that was just unheard of. She was like, what do you mean you're gonna go to Rome on your own? Like, no. Strict Filipino mom, right? Like chase me around with a knife kind of mom. That was really hard to get her on board with that. But a lot of it I realized that I did was really one being adamant that I was gonna go. Like there was nothing that was gonna stop me. I was gonna go regardless. But two, it was helping her with what she needed. And I've talked to other women about this as well, of working with that parent or that person that's in your life and helping them with whatever their fears are. Because if they really cared about you, which a lot of them do, right? That's why they're in your life. Um, that opinion might be just because they are afraid for you. And if that's the case, it's working with them of like, okay, like what are your fears? Like, is it because you're not going to be able to see me? Let's have video chats and do them more frequently. Or is it because you won't have my location? Let me share my location with you. I don't care where, if you have it, if that makes you feel better. Um, or I don't know what it is that you're going to be doing or what that place looks like. Okay, let's do a video tour, virtual video tour. There's some YouTube videos so you just feel more familiar, or maybe come out and visit. So I think that there's ways that you can work with their fears so that you give them the information and you look well researched in the process. Because when you're coming up with these things, they're like, oh, okay, she's got this, she's done the work. I trust that she can get herself through. And then, of course, there's the people that are pushing their own limiting beliefs onto you. And so with
Right.
those people, I would just not tell them until you're gone. And then because you can't change people's minds, right? The people that care about you and those people, you can help them along in their journey to trusting you to make sure that they're okay, their fears are abated. But for the other people that are just trying to hold you back, because they don't believe it's possible or that for a woman that it's within societal norms for women to
Right.
travel on their own, for example. Those people I show them afterwards, or maybe not
Hmm.
even. They'll just find out on Instagram So I think there were
Right.
a lot
Right.
of people that you have to show them after the fact. And then once you've gone a few times, then they start to realize it's possible and you are that person that showed them. And so then it's an easier conversation later down the line. But that way, if you do it afterwards, they're not holding you back, and you're that source of inspiration for them, whether they know it or not.
Okay. So who is the ideal client? Who is the ideal woman um, for the work that you do?
Yeah, so really, it's a range. So it could be um, women that are going through their like mid 20s or their mid 30s crises and realizing, oh, wow, I'm living a life I don't love. Or it could be women in their 40s or 50s even. A lot of them post-divorce that have reached out and realizing, oh wow, like I've raised kids or I've like done this career and I've had this relationship and I'm not happy or we're going through a divorce and so now I have like this whole new lease on life and I want to start over and book the next trip to this bucket list place that I had never gone to, and helping those women as well navigate through the resources, through the coaching, through whatever needs that they have. So really women in general, but specifically I've worked with mid 20s to at this point I think like mid 50s.
Okay. Tell us about play personality. That's something that you have developed to help narrow down some of your choices. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so the play personalities really come from the research by the Play Institute by Dr. Stuart Brown. So he's a play researcher and he's done thousands of play histories and really dug into play in general and all aspects of it and how it impacts your life and childhood healing and everything. So I've really taken his concept of play personalities and applied it into this travel realm. So what he did was he did play histories, which was understanding how people played as a child, people play in their lives. And he came down and boiled it down to 8 different play personalities. And from those play personalities, you start to get an idea of what lit someone up when they were younger and introduce how to introduce those same things back into their life as an adult. Because it's pretty overwhelming to if you were a workaholic like I was, I didn't have hobbies. I threw all of that out the window. I think I used to like to read, but didn't do that when I was working 16 hours a day. So when you are so focused on one area of your life that you don't even have time for play, you don't know where to start. So this is a good starting point. So what I usually like to ask people is, what was your favorite childhood activity? And that starts to stir up the memories from childhood of the things that lit you up, the things that you did just because you wanted to and it felt good and light for you. And from there, I can, oh, shoots, 1 second.
While you're getting
Headphones.
that, it's okay. While you're getting that, it dawns on me that we live in such a hustle culture that sometimes play feels wrong. Like we should
Yes.
always be working or building up to something, but just doing something just for the love of it seems wrong sometimes. There's guilt there.
Yeah, and we don't realize that I love the analogy that he uses as well, is that play, it's either work or play. And if we're not working, then we feel like we're not doing enough or that we're not going to be successful. But if you think about you as a house, and if you're only on one pillar and that pillar is work, then any external factors that come into play, whether that be health or job changes or family changes, your pillar only is on one thing, right? Which is work, and that's going to topple. Whereas you have a much more solid foundation if you have play and work as your base. It's a much more balanced, even distribution of your life as well. Because if then there's work issues that happen, then at least, okay, you still got the one pillar, you still have the activities that light you up. Um, so it really is required. It's not play or work, it's play and work. And there's ways to incorporate play into your work as well as outside of your work. So that's also a topic that I'm like deeply passionate about and how to apply that in your life. But with the play personalities, it's understanding then what lit you up as an adult or was as a child and incorporating that as an adult. So, what was your favorite childhood activity, for example?
Reading and researching, and I still love it. Still love it.
Yeah, so that tells me with the reading, that's like a storyteller play personality.
Mhm. And
Um,
I write as well. Yes.
yeah, so that makes a lot of sense then that storyteller part is still in your life in the form
Mhm.
of your writing, in the form of your podcast and sharing other people's stories. And it's by getting back in touch with the things that we used to like to do and incorporating that back into our adult lives that we find that lightness and play and that purpose again. So I'm glad that that was something that you have in your life. And
Yes.
when you're looking to travel somewhere new, that is also something that I recommend for other people is to tap back into that play personality. So if you like to write, and read, then maybe when you go to a different country, go to the bookstores, go to the writing clubs and the book clubs
Exactly.
and meet
Museums.
people that way, museums, exactly, because then that's where you're going to meet like-minded people and you already have a connection point in common that lights you up and more than likely lights them up as well. So that's really how do you make friends in a new city? What do you do in a new city? And making sure that the activities that you're doing aren't just the bucket list, take an Instagram photo and leave. It's go to the museum, go to this grand bookstore and really get embedded in the activities that you love. And then you start to have a hobby. Like for me, I love doing art. And so I've gone and done like art classes in all these different cities. And now it's kind of a thing, or like salsa classes. So I've danced in at least 8 different cities and done salsa
Hmm.
and learned
Hmm.
salsa from 8 different places. So you start to create your own movie for your own life based off of the things that light you up. So that's definitely something I start with as well as part of the work that I do.
And I like what you're saying. You're actually creating. You're creating your life. You're not being
Hmm.
compelled like you were before, you know, climbing up the corporate ladder. Um,
Hmm.
you are directing. You're not being pulled. If that's makes sense. That's how I hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember in some of those darker days that I had where I would wake up early, go to work right away. I would wake up, I had an oh shit alarm. I was like my roommates would always be like, "Oh, okay, Jalene's up," because it was wake up in a frantic state, right? Chaos. And then immediately drive to work and then sit there and work for 8, 12, 14 hours. I remember being at work until like 2 a.m. sometimes and then get some fast food on the way home, eat that burrito as you're driving through traffic, if, depending on the time that you're driving, and then start all over again. And I did that
Wow.
for a really long time. And the only time I wasn't doing that was when I was drinking heavily. Which was on the weekends, because the travel wasn't my only escape. But I didn't know because at that point I was like, oh, I'm just in my 20s. Like this is what
Right.
20-plus-year-olds do is that you drink on the weekends and you have fun. And I didn't realize, oh, okay,
You
but
were
like
numbing.
taking 10
Right.
shots. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly. Or eating a lot. Like the moments where I finally had time to eat, I was binge eating because it was like, oh, well, excusing it in myself of like, oh, okay, well, I don't know the next time I'll have time to eat. But really, like, wow, I'm not prioritizing my health. I'm not prioritizing friends. I lost a lot of friends in this process because I wasn't investing in them. Also, like I lost touch with family, lost touch with myself. And so in this process of rebuilding your life from scratch, I tell people start with play because that's going to be the easiest way to incorporate the goodness back into your life and help you keep moving forward as you start to really create the other aspects of your life again.
Excellent. What are you working on? Any projects right now, aside from what we've already talked about?
Oh, so many projects. Well, yeah, launching the startups, which is a passion project, of course. But towards this end of the year, I also have my own book. It is so last year I published the 2024 manifestation journal or manifestation tracker, excuse me. And I created this because I wanted to help people create the lives that they wanted to have. And to start this off, you have to really see all of the magic that is already in your life. So, gratitude is a huge part of my practice, especially in the roller coaster of life. You lose track of the things that you do receive. And so, by recognizing the small things, you call in the larger things into your life. So, I created this manifestation tracker because I wanted to keep track of all the things that was happening in my life so then I could start to recognize the bigger things. So,
Mm,
the way that it works is there's some exercises in the beginning to help you understand what your values are and help you design the life that you want to have for that year and what's important to you on a quarterly basis, reassessing the areas of your life that you're going to focus on. So, whether that's like your career or your health or your family, like being intentional on a quarterly basis on what aspects you're going to be focusing on and the goals related to that. So I have spaces in the journal that really target those questions. And then each month identifying as things come into your life, like the things that came in, whether it was like a free coffee or you ended up getting a dollar scratch off win or whatever small thing it is, writing it all down and realizing like at the end, okay, which one was I most grateful for? Which one did I call in that came to me, and realizing how much magic you're actually creating on a monthly basis. So I am creating that updated version for 2025, and that'll be releasing before the new year. So that'll be 2025 Manifestation Tracker.
Wonderful. And you release this every year?
Yeah. So this will be the second year I'm releasing it. So last year the theme was moons and constellations and stars, and I'm thinking this year I want a little bit more hope in it. So I think it'll have maybe like hot air balloons and sunrises and just a little bit more of that like magic. So I like to have, because every year when you have a planner, you want a different type of planner to plan your year,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
To just set the mood for the year. And so I'm really part of it is creating it for myself. Like, what do I want to see in 2025? And after such a dark 2024, at least for myself, I want to bring in a little bit more lightness into the world.
Yeah.
So the theme for the next year will be a lot more light.
Okay. Excellent. Where can we find you online, your socials?
Yeah, so if you head to travelnottoescape.com, I'll have all my links on there and that'll be
Okay.
easier. And also on Travel Not to Escape on Instagram, or Jeline on the Go on Instagram, and you'll find everything on there.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're at the point of our talk where I ask you the same five questions I ask all of our guests. We're the Healing Words podcast, so I ask you something from the first letter of the word words. W. When? When did you know? Let's talk about, because we've talked about the genesis of your traveling. Let's talk about
Mhm.
your journal. When did you know for certain that you were going to write this journal?
Ooh, okay. So it was 4 days before the new year last year. I had a
You got it done in
twenty-twenty-three
four
goal.
days?
I got it done in 4 days. Yeah. And I had launched my podcast in 4 days. That was actually the theme of 2023 for me, was that you can procrastinate so much on the goals that you have, but if you give yourself a short deadline, you will get
Mhm.
it done. And I did that with my podcast, and I did that with this journal. I had this idea. I want to be an author before the 2023 year ends. And I published it right as
So
New Year's was
December, like right
hitting.
after Christmas.
Yeah, it was like December 31st I hit publish. I was working through it up until midnight was about to hit. So I remember that was my goal, and I made it through. So if you want to create a journal, self-publish it on Amazon, you can do it in 4 days if you really have that drive in you. I was, again, workaholism tendencies came back in, but it happened. And this year it's November, so we're giving ourselves a little bit more time
There you
and
go.
releasing the next version, which I'm excited about.
Okay. Well, normally this question for the O is, did you face any obstacles? But if you were only doing 4 days, I mean, that's not even time to have obstacles. How did you, or organize, how did you organize your day? Um, if you did this in 4 days, you must have been doing this all day. Were you doing your
Yes.
other work as well?
No, no, I was only working on these for 4 days. Well, because it's the 4 days between Christmas and New Year's as
Yeah.
well. You can get a lot done within those 4 days. But the obstacle is actually formatting. Figure out the formatting ahead of time, because you're gonna have to reformat everything afterwards if it's not in the right margins and bleed lines. And that took a whole day, just
Mm,
rearranging all of the 170 pages that I already had and moving things within margins. So
yeah.
save yourself some time, set the margins ahead of time, and you'll save yourself a whole 8 hours.
Okay. R is rear view. Now that you know what you know, if you could go back and speak to Jeline when she
Mm.
was knocking down shots,
Yeah.
not living her life, stressed out, depressed because of her job, what would you tell her?
I would give her a hug, to be honest, because we all, I think at that point, that version of ourselves, like we're not feeling seen. There's something that just is not feeling right in our lives. So first I would show her a lot of compassion and give her a hug and just say like, you'll get through this. We'll get through this together. But let's take it one step at a time. Like, and for me, that first step was hitting a rock bottom and going to therapy. So find whatever support system avenue is good for you. and just lean 100% into it. I saw that same therapist every week for the next 2 years,
Mm,
and did some hard work. So whatever that looks like for you, that for me at that point, that was the avenue I chose. But yeah, compassion and take the one step and lean in.
yeah. Because one step is going to lead to the next step. A lot of times we think if we don't see the whole picture, or if most women think if I don't make the right decision, the right next step, and so they don't move because they don't know what the next right step is. But I know
Hmm.
for a fact if you just take a step, you know, then the next step will show up.
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 Things have a way of coming into your life. You just have to be awake to be able to see it. And that's like again that goes with the manifestation tracker. Like you start to recognize the things that are coming into your life. So part of the process of taking the steps is like opening your eyes a little wider and
Yeah.
heading into the direction and getting a little bit more clarity into a new life.
Okay. So normally the majority of the people that I talk to here, the authors, they've written some kind of memoir style.
Mhm.
But so I'm gonna, and I always ask them a different question for the D, but I'm gonna ask you, we're gonna use D for design. You have taken the time to design the life you want. Are there any other things you want?
Oh yeah, I mean, life is a work in progress, right? And while I might be living a full travel lifestyle, I'm still a very ambitious person, and I want to make an impact with the work that I'm doing, and I think that I can reach a lot more people than I have been, and so that's definitely something that I'm working towards actively from a career professional standpoint. So, yeah, impact, purpose, that's really two of my top values. But from a life perspective, there's different stages of being a nomad, or traveler. And initially, it's just like, oh, yeah, I can go and I can travel and I'm traveling really fast. And then now I'm at the point where I'm traveling slower and being more intentional with my time because I'm also using it to build and work. And then in the future, ideally, it would be with a partner that also shares the same lifestyle as me and traveling together. So, yeah, it changes, but
It
there's
changes.
always things to look forward to in life.
How have you been strengthened on this journey? How are you different now than you were 10 years ago on the
Oh
last
man.
day of your job, that corporate job?
Ooh, I was in tears in the corner and feeling like my world had ended and that I was giving up so much. I thought because I was giving up my identity. Whenever I introduced myself, it was always like, "Hi, my name is Jeline," and then my job title. And we are so attached to that because that is exactly what is attached to our name. Everyone knows us by that, right? Every new person even knows us by that. And so it was a lot for me to get rid of that identity. And now I feel like my identity is so many different things. When people ask me, like, what do you do? I do so many things and things that light me up. And I feel so expanded by that. And I feel like there's a lot more possibilities for me than when I was stuck and I have felt like I gave everything up. So, um, yeah, just the realization that you are more than your title, you are more than whatever life it is that you have right now, and that you have the opportunity to change what it is that you do however many times in your life. And it's okay. And it's not saying anything about you as a person.
Right. Excellent. Thank you for stopping by, Jeline. This has been
Yay.
wonderful. I've got so many wheels turning in my head, and I'm sure our viewers and listeners do the same, have the same feeling as well. And I think they'll be reaching out to you.
Yay. So happy to be on. And thank you so much for this lovely interview. And yeah, I'm just so excited to connect. Feel free to connect with me if you have any questions. Happy to have a chat.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all next time on the Healing Words podcast. Bye bye.
Thanks. Yay.